If you ever want to see true courage, follow the one nobody believes in. Sophia whispered to herself as she darted between the dense pines, rain dripping from the dark green canopy above and soaking the hem of her cloak. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine needles, and the distant sound of the pack's drums thumped like a heartbeat, reminding her that she was alone in the forest while the grand ceremony unfolded miles away. Her white skin glimmered faintly under the fragmented moonlight as she pressed forward, eyes scanning the shadows for the source of the desperate whimpers that cut through the rustle of leaves. Each step brought a flash of silver fur into view beneath a tangle of branches. A young wolf, limping and clearly exhausted, its amber eyes blinking up at her with a trust that seemed impossible after the neglect it had faced. Sophia crouched low, feeling the thrum of her own heart as a strange warmth pooled in her chest, an instinctual pull urging her to act. "It's okay. I'm here," she murmured, her fingers trembling as she brushed away leaves and dirt from the wolf's side, feeling the subtle pulse of life beneath her touch. Somewhere deep in the shadows, the rustle of other creatures reminded her of the dangers she had ignored. The pack's patrols would not be forgiving if they discovered her meddling, but the urgency of the wolf's need outweighed every fear. Her breaths came shallow and quick, and yet each movement was deliberate, methodical, as she pressed her hands against the ragged fur, whispering calming words, letting her presence soothe the pain that the young creature could not articulate. The moon, peeking through a gap in the branches, cast a silver beam across the small clearing, highlighting the glint of determination in Sophia's deep green eyes and the subtle shimmer that began to radiate from her palms, faint at first, then growing with a warmth that wrapped around the wolf in gentle waves of light. She felt a quiet shock of wonder as the wounds began to close, the limp easing as the creature lifted its head and nuzzled against her, a small whine of relief escaping its throat. Somewhere on a high ridge, the wind carried a ripple of acknowledgement, as if the forest itself paused to witness the bond being formed. Sophia's chest swelled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. This was no ordinary wolf, she realized, but something far greater, something whose presence demanded attention even in the absence of the Alpha King. And then, breaking through the canopy above, a shadow moved with such sudden precision that her breath caught. Nathaniel Blackwood, Alpha King himself, stood at the edge of the clearing, eyes like polished steel fixed on her with a weight that made her knees threaten to buckle. She could not see his full expression, only the intensity in those winter blue eyes, the recognition that she had acted with courage where others had faltered. Her heart thundered, not in fear, but in the mounting certainty that this night, this act of quiet heroism, had shifted everything. The wolf pressed against her, and in that moment, Sophia understood that the connection was deeper than rescue, deeper than gratitude. It was a whisper of destiny, a silent declaration that her place in this world was being acknowledged, that the bond she had forged would not be ignored. The rain fell harder now, slicking the leaves and darkening the forest floor, but she barely noticed, her focus fixed entirely on the creature she had saved and the powerful figure watching, kneeling slightly, as though even the Alpha King himself could not deny what had transpired. Each second stretched into eternity, the rhythm of raindrops against her cloak mirroring the pulse of awe, anticipation, and a budding sense of belonging that Sophia had never before experienced. And as she lifted the wolf into her arms, cradling it carefully, the faint glow around her hands pulsed brighter, reflecting the unspoken promise that tonight was only the beginning of something extraordinary. A story written in moonlight and courage, a tale that would echo across the pack forever. The forest seemed to exhale around Sophia as she adjusted the weight of the wolf in her arms, its small body trembling, yet gradually growing steadier under the gentle warmth of her hands. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, each droplet, creating a faint rhythm on the leaves above, and she realized that the world beyond this clearing felt impossibly distant, as if she had stepped into a sanctuary carved out of time itself. Her breathing matched the quiet pulse of the creature she held, steadying herself as she traced the pattern of silver and gold in its fur, marveling at the subtle shimmer that seemed almost magical. Every sound in the forest was amplified, the rustle of leaves, the soft patter of water, the distant hoot of an owl, but none of it distracted her from the moment, from the fragile life she had chosen to protect. She shifted carefully, feeling the uneven ground beneath her feet, and whispered assurances as if her voice alone could weave a cocoon of safety around the wolf. Then, just beyond the trees, movement stirred in the shadows, catching the corner of her eye. Sophia froze, her instincts flaring. Yet when she turned fully, she saw Nathaniel stepping forward with quiet authority, the lines of his frame softened by the dim light, yet every step deliberate, measured, carrying a weight of presence that drew the air taut around him. The wolf lifted its head, amber eyes locking with his, and a low whine of recognition escaped its throat, bringing a flicker of surprise across Sophia's face. Nathaniel did not speak at first. He merely observed, his expression inscrutable, but his eyes held a depth of consideration that made her pulse quicken. The forest seemed to hold its breath alongside her as he drew nearer, and Sophia felt an unfamiliar certainty, a sense that her actions had resonated far beyond this single act of care. Slowly, Nathaniel knelt, maintaining a respectful distance, and Sophia could see the faintest trace of emotion in the set of his shoulders, the tilt of his head, as though he understood in an instant the courage it had taken to arrive at this clearing. The wolf shifted slightly in her embrace, curling closer against her chest, and she felt the warmth spread through her, connecting them in a silent bond that seemed to illuminate the shadows around them. Time itself felt suspended, each second drawn out in the quiet communion between the three of them, and Sophia realized that the significance of this moment was not measured by the presence of the Alpha King alone, but by the recognition of her own resolve, the unspoken acknowledgement of bravery and compassion. Her heart, once weighed down by the indifference of the pack, now fluttered with an unexpected lightness, and she allowed herself a brief glance toward Nathaniel, meeting the steady gaze of his winter-blue eyes, which reflected a mixture of awe and approval. The clearing, bathed in moonlight that had broken through the thinning clouds, seemed to glow with a soft radiance, highlighting the wolf's newly healed strength and the gentle curve of Sophia's determined expression. Every detail, the shimmer of fur, the glint in her eyes, the faint golden light that had radiated from her hands, melded together, creating a tableau of courage and destiny. And as Nathaniel finally spoke, his voice calm, yet resonant, it carried across the stillness, a quiet acknowledgement that reverberated within her, that her choice to act, to defy the expectations of those who doubted her, had not gone unnoticed, and that the path she had stepped onto would lead to a story far greater than any she had dared imagine. Sophia stood motionless after Nathaniel's words faded into the night, her heart beating so loudly she was certain the forest itself could hear it. The young wolf remained nestled against her chest, no longer trembling, its breathing calm, and even as if the fear that had once burdened it had finally slipped away. For a moment, she forgot about the pack, the whispers, the years spent being overlooked. All she could focus on was the strange feeling settling deep within her soul, warm and steady like sunlight breaking through winter clouds. Nathaniel slowly rose to his feet, but his gaze never left the wolf. There was something in his expression she could not understand, something far more personal than simple gratitude. Then the young wolf shifted in her arms and let out a soft sound that almost resembled laughter. Sophia blinked in surprise. The creature twisted carefully, pressing its nose against her hand before lifting its head higher than before. The amber eyes that looked back at her seemed impossibly intelligent, almost human. A cool breeze drifted through the clearing, carrying the scent of pine and rain. Somewhere beyond the trees, distant voices echoed faintly. Members of the Royal Patrol were searching nearby. Nathaniel glanced toward the sound before returning his attention to the wolf. "You have caused enough worry for one night," he said quietly. To Sophia's shock, the wolf responded with an unmistakably guilty expression. Her eyes widened. She looked from the wolf to Nathaniel and back again. "What is happening?" she asked softly. Nathaniel exhaled, and for the first time since she had met him, a small smile touched the corner of his mouth. "There is something you deserve to know." The wolf suddenly slipped from her arms and landed gracefully on the damp forest floor. Sophia instinctively reached forward, worried it might collapse, but instead the young creature stood tall. Silver moonlight spilled through the trees, wrapping around him like liquid light. The air seemed to shimmer, Sophia gasped softly as the glow grew brighter. She shielded her eyes for only a second, and when she looked again, the wolf was gone. Standing where he had been was a young man who looked no older than 18. Silver blonde hair framed a handsome face, and those same amber eyes stared back at her with unmistakable warmth. Sophia could not move. She could barely breathe. The young man offered her a sheepish smile before bowing his head. "I suppose introductions are overdue," he said. "My name is Orion Blackwood." The name struck her like a thunderclap. Every member of the Northern Territories knew that name. Orion Blackwood was the only son of the ruling bloodline, the future heir to the throne, the Wolf Prince. Sophia stared at him in complete disbelief. "You are," she whispered. Orion nodded. "I am." Her mind raced through every story she had ever heard. Royal ceremonies, grand celebrations, the beloved prince who often disappeared beyond palace walls to explore the wilderness, the heir everyone adored. And somehow she had spent the last hour carrying him through the forest without knowing who he was. Embarrassment flooded her cheeks. "I did not." "No," she said quickly. Orion's smile widened. "That is exactly why I trust you." Nathaniel watched the exchange quietly. His expression softened as he looked at Sophia. "Most people see a title before they see a person," he said. "You saw someone who needed help." Sophia lowered her eyes, unsure how to respond. No one had ever spoken about her with such respect before. The realization felt almost unreal. Above them, the clouds finally parted, revealing a sky filled with stars. The rain had ended completely. The forest seemed brighter now, transformed by the silver glow of the moon. Yet Sophia sensed that the night was far from over. Because for the first time, the Alpha King was looking at her not as an insignificant Omega hidden in the shadows, but as someone whose actions had changed the course of his family's fate. For several long seconds, Sophia could only stare at Orion, trying to reconcile the young prince standing before her with the injured wolf she had carried through the rain. The stories she had heard throughout her life painted the royal family as distant figures who existed far above ordinary wolves. Yet the young man before her looked relieved, grateful, and surprisingly approachable. Orion rubbed the back of his neck and laughed softly. "You are looking at me like I just stepped out of a legend." Sophia blinked. "You kind of did." The admission slipped out before she could stop it, and to her surprise, both Orion and Nathaniel smiled. The tension that had filled the clearing eased slightly. For the first time all night, Sophia felt herself breathe normally. Yet questions crowded her mind. "Why were you alone?" she finally asked. Orion exchanged a brief glance with his father. "I wanted one day without guards following me everywhere," he admitted. "One day to explore the old forest trails." His expression became sheepish. It did not exactly go according to plan. Nathaniel folded his arms, though there was more concern than annoyance in his eyes. "That is an understatement." Orion lowered his gaze. "I know." Sophia watched the exchange and saw something unexpected. Beyond the crown and titles, they were simply a father and son. The realization made them seem more human than the distant figures described in countless stories. A gentle breeze moved through the clearing, stirring the branches overhead. Somewhere nearby, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the woods. Moments later, several members of the royal patrol emerged from the trees. Relief immediately appeared on their faces when they saw Orion standing safely beside Nathaniel. They bowed respectfully, but their attention soon shifted toward Sophia. Curiosity flickered in their expressions. She instantly felt self-conscious. Her cloak was damp, her boots covered in mud, and she looked nothing like the elegant women who usually attended royal events. Instinctively, she stepped back. Years of being overlooked had taught her how to disappear. But before she could retreat into the shadows, Nathaniel spoke. "Stay." The single word stopped her. His voice was calm, yet carried quiet authority. The guards exchanged surprised glances. Sophia noticed it immediately. They were not surprised by an order. They were surprised that the order involved her. Nathaniel turned toward his men. This Omega helped the prince when no one else was there. His gaze shifted back to Sophia. Her actions deserve respect. Sophia felt heat rise into her cheeks. Respect. It was such a simple word, yet she could not remember the last time anyone had offered it to her. The guards bowed their heads toward her, and the gesture left her almost speechless. Orion stepped closer with a bright smile. You saved me from a very embarrassing conversation with my father. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. Only one conversation? Orion laughed. Even Sophia found herself smiling. The forest no longer felt cold. The loneliness she carried for so many years seemed lighter somehow, as though an invisible weight had begun to lift from her shoulders. Then one of the guards approached Nathaniel and quietly handed him a folded message. Nathaniel opened it and read the contents. The warmth in his expression slowly faded. His eyes narrowed slightly. Sophia noticed the change immediately. Something was wrong. Orion noticed it too. What happened? Nathaniel lowered the paper. For a brief moment, silence settled across the clearing once more. Then he looked directly at Sophia. It appears tonight's events have already spread farther than they should have. Sophia's stomach tightened. She did not understand what he meant, but she suddenly sensed that the simple act of helping someone in need was about to pull her into a world far larger than she had ever imagined. Sophia could not take her eyes off Nathaniel as he folded the message and slipped it into the inside pocket of his dark coat. The easy atmosphere that had briefly settled over the clearing vanished like mist beneath morning sunlight. Around them, even the royal guards seemed more alert. Orion stepped forward immediately. "What does it say?" he asked. Nathaniel remained silent for a moment, his gaze drifting toward the distant lights of the pack gathering beyond the forest. The celebration fires glowed faintly through the trees, reminding Sophia that while her world had changed forever in the last hour, the rest of the territory continued unaware. Finally, Nathaniel spoke. "Several witnesses have already reported unusual events in the forest." Orion frowned. "Witnesses?" Nathaniel nodded. "Word is spreading that an Omega displayed a gift no one can explain." Sophia's stomach tightened. Instantly, memories flooded her mind. The warmth in her hands, the golden light, the way Orion's condition had improved beneath her touch. She had barely understood it herself. How could anyone else? One of the guards shifted uneasily. "People are talking, Your Majesty. Some are calling it a blessing." Another guard hesitated before continuing. "Others are calling it something else." Sophia lowered her eyes. She already knew what that meant. Throughout history, anything different was often feared before it was understood. Nathaniel noticed her expression. "You are worried." It was not a question. Sophia swallowed hard. "I have spent my entire life trying not to stand out." Her voice came out softer than she intended. "Now everyone seems to be looking at me." The honesty surprised even her. Orion immediately stepped closer. "Then let them look." Sophia blinked. Orion's amber eyes were sincere. "You helped someone because it was the right thing to do. That is nothing to hide." She wanted to believe him. She truly did. But she knew how quickly opinions could change. Nathaniel studied her quietly. There was a depth to his gaze that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. Not judged, not dismissed, simply understood. "Fear often follows what people do not understand," he said calmly. "But that does not make their fears correct." The words settled deep within her. Before she could respond, another sound echoed through the forest. More footsteps. Several additional riders emerged from between the trees, their horses moving carefully across the damp ground. At their center rode a silver-haired woman wrapped in a dark cloak embroidered with royal symbols. The moment Orion saw her, his face brightened. "Grandmother." Sophia immediately recognized her. Every citizen of the Northern Territories knew the image of Queen Evelyn Blackwood. Even in her later years, she carried herself with effortless grace and quiet strength. The queen dismounted before anyone could assist her and walked directly toward Orion. Relief filled her features as she placed both hands on his face. "You gave us quite a scare." Orion looked appropriately embarrassed. "I know." Then Queen Evelyn's attention shifted toward Sophia. Her blue eyes softened immediately. Sophia suddenly felt nervous all over again. The queen approached slowly, studying her with careful curiosity. For several long seconds, neither woman spoke. Then the queen smiled. It was warm and genuine. "So you are the young woman everyone is searching for." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. Everyone. The word sounded far larger than she wanted it to. Queen Evelyn gently reached for her hand. The moment their fingers touched, surprise flashed across the older woman's face. Not fear, not concern, wonder. She looked directly at Nathaniel. Then she looked back at Sophia. "Interesting," she whispered. Nathaniel's expression sharpened immediately. "What is it?" The queen did not answer right away. Instead, She continued looking at Sophia as though she had just discovered something hidden for a very long time. And for reasons she could not explain, Sophia suddenly felt that this night was revealing only the first layer of a much larger mystery. Sophia felt a sudden shift in the forest air as Queen Evelyn stepped closer, her gaze steady and insightful, taking in every detail of the clearing. The glistening dew on the leaves, the faint golden glow still lingering around the wolf prints, and the subtle tremor in Sophia's own posture. Nathaniel remained a few paces behind, his presence calm but commanding, eyes never leaving Sophia as if he were measuring her worth in silence. Orion, now fully transformed back into human form, stayed close to Sophia, his expression a mixture of gratitude and cautious amusement. The queen spoke, her voice soft yet carrying a natural authority that seemed to make the very trees lean in. "I have heard whispers of your actions, Sophia Langley," she said, her eyes studying Sophia's hands, the same hands that had healed the prince. Sophia lowered her gaze, unsure what to say, feeling a strange combination of pride and embarrassment. Nathaniel finally stepped forward, his boots crunching on the damp forest floor, and placed a reassuring hand on Sophia's shoulder. "You do not need to explain," he said. "The forest has already witnessed what is important." Sophia's heart caught at the words, the gentle acknowledgement from the Alpha King himself settling into a warm certainty inside her chest. The air seemed to thrum with possibility as the queen's gaze flicked between Sophia and Nathaniel. "The bond formed tonight is rare," Evelyn continued. "Not only did you save him, but you did so with no thought of reward or recognition. That speaks volumes of your character." Sophia's chest lifted slightly, a faint smile forming as a soft warmth spread through her. The same feeling that had guided her hands earlier now expanding into a quiet strength. Orion's amber eyes met hers, shining with an unspoken promise, and she felt the depth of trust that had already begun to grow between them. Nathaniel's attention shifted momentarily to Orion, but he returned quickly to Sophia, his expression softer than she had ever seen it, almost like a quiet acknowledgement of the courage and compassion she had displayed. The forest seemed to breathe with them, the distant glow of the ceremony beyond the trees acting as a reminder that while the world remained vast and full of expectations, for this single moment, they had created a sanctuary of clarity and understanding. Sophia felt the weight of anticipation and destiny pressing gently against her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a realization that her actions had created a ripple larger than she could have imagined. The moon broke fully through the clouds, silver beams dancing across the moss-covered ground, and Sophia felt a surge of clarity. She knew that from this moment forward, the forest, the prince, and even the Alpha King would never see her as she had always been. Hidden, overlooked, insignificant. Nathaniel stepped slightly closer, his presence filling the space with a calm certainty that both grounded and empowered her. Orion gave a small, appreciative nod, as if confirming that Sophia's courage had altered not just one life, but the course of events that could shape the entire territory. Queen Evelyn watched silently, a subtle smile on her lips, recognizing that what Sophia had done was not only brave, but transformative. Sophia drew a deep breath, feeling a quiet pride settle into her chest, the night around them no longer just a forest, but a living, breathing witness to the power of courage, compassion, and the unexpected bonds that can form when one chooses to act with a selfless heart. The silence that followed felt different from any Sophia had ever known. It was no longer the silence of being ignored. It was the silence that comes when people are waiting for something important to happen. The royal guard stood respectfully beneath the moonlit trees. Queen Evelyn remained calm, her knowing smile never fully fading. Orion looked between his father and Sophia with growing anticipation, as though he sensed a moment approaching that would be remembered for years to come. Sophia herself felt completely unprepared for the attention surrounding her. She glanced toward the distant glow of the festival fires and wondered what the members of her pack would think if they could see her now. Most of them barely noticed her during ordinary days. Some could not even remember her name. Yet here she stood in the center of the royal family, uncertain how her life had changed so quickly. Nathaniel slowly stepped forward. Every movement seemed deliberate. The forest became impossibly still. Even the wind appeared to pause among the branches. Sophia instinctively straightened, her pulse quickening as the Alpha King stopped directly before her. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Nathaniel studied her with an expression she could not fully understand. There was respect there, gratitude, and something deeper that seemed connected to a memory he had not yet shared. Finally, he looked toward the assembled guards. For years, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the clearing, our people have spoken about strength. The guards immediately focused on him. Orion remained motionless. Queen Evelyn watched quietly. Nathaniel continued. Many believe strength comes from power, status, or position. Many believe it belongs only to kings, warriors, and rulers. His gaze returned to Sophia. Tonight, they were wrong. Sophia felt her breath catch. The words seemed to echo through the forest itself. Nathaniel took another step closer. A young Omega entered this forest with no expectation of recognition. She did not know she was helping a prince. She did not know anyone was watching. She saw someone in need, and she acted. The guards exchanged thoughtful glances. Several lowered their heads respectfully. Nathaniel's voice softened. That is true strength. Emotion tightened in Sophia's chest. She had spent years questioning her value, years wondering whether she mattered at all. Yet every word felt sincere. Orion smiled openly now, looking proud of her in a way that made her cheeks warm. Then something happened that no one expected. Nathaniel lowered his head. Slowly and deliberately, the Alpha King dropped to one knee before Sophia. Gasps filled the clearing. Several guards looked stunned. Even Sophia's eyes widened in disbelief. The ruler of the Northern Territories remained there without hesitation, his expression unwavering. Sophia Langley, he said, on behalf of my family, and on behalf of this kingdom, I offer my gratitude. The world seemed to stop. Sophia could hardly process what she was seeing. The most powerful man in the territory was kneeling before her, not because of duty or ceremony, but because he genuinely believed she deserved honor. Tears threatened to form in her eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. Orion looked delighted. Queen Evelyn's smile deepened with quiet satisfaction. Nathaniel remained kneeling for several seconds before rising once more. When he stood, his eyes met Sophia's. No one who witnessed this night, he said gently, will ever question your worth again. And for the first time in her life, Sophia believed it. Sophia stood still as the clearing seemed to hold its breath, the moonlight filtering through the trees casting silver patterns across the mossy ground. She could feel the weight of the moment settling into her chest, a mixture of pride, disbelief, and quiet joy that pulsed with every heartbeat. Orion remained beside her, the prince now fully recovered, his amber eyes scanning the clearing as if to memorize every detail of the night that had changed his life. Nathaniel lingered just behind, his presence calm and commanding, yet softened by the gentle acknowledgement of Sophia's courage. The queen observed silently, her posture regal, yet there was warmth in her eyes that mirrored Sophia's own growing confidence. Around them, the guards remained attentive, aware that the significance of this moment extended far beyond the usual protocols. Sophia allowed herself a small breath, noticing for the first time how the forest around them had changed in appearance. The rain had stopped completely, leaving behind a fresh scent of pine and damp earth, and the leaves glistened like 1,000 tiny stars under the moonlight. The young wolf prince padded lightly at her feet, brushing against her legs as if to remind her of the bond they shared. She looked down and smiled softly, realizing that even in this brief span of time, trust and respect had been forged stronger than she had ever experienced in her life. Nathaniel's voice broke the silence, calm yet resonant, carrying through the clearing like a gentle command. This night will be remembered, not for the title of the prince or the authority of the king, but for the courage of one who chose to act when it mattered most. Sophia felt a shiver of validation pass through her. The words, though simple, carried the weight of an entire kingdom's recognition. Orion stepped closer and offered a small nod, his smile reassuring. You saw what needed to be done and did not hesitate. That is rare, he said softly. Sophia's cheeks flushed slightly, and she lowered her gaze, unaccustomed to such direct praise from royalty. Nathaniel, noticing her discomfort, inclined his head respectfully. You do not need to be modest. This is not about humility. It is about the truth of your actions. The clearing seemed to hum with understanding, as if every tree and stone had absorbed the energy of the moment. Sophia lifted her eyes and saw the glimmer of moonlight reflecting in Nathaniel's deep blue eyes, steady and sincere. She felt a sense of balance returning, a quiet reassurance that her bravery had not gone unnoticed. Queen Evelyn approached slowly and placed a gentle hand on Sophia's shoulder. "You have done more than anyone could have expected," she said. "The bonds formed tonight will influence many for years to come." Sophia's heart swelled, realizing that the night was no longer just a test or an unexpected challenge. It had become a turning point, one that marked the beginning of her place within the forest, the royal family, and the lives she had touched. The young prince patted around her again, his movement playful yet careful, and Sophia could not help but laugh softly, a sound that felt light and free in the night air. Nathaniel stepped forward once more, his posture straight, his gaze steady, and Sophia understood that from this point forward, her actions and courage had permanently reshaped the world around her, creating a bond of trust, respect, and destiny that could not be broken, a connection that would guide the next steps of her life and the lives of those she had chosen to help. The night gradually surrendered to the first hints of dawn, and a pale ribbon of gold appeared. Beyond the distant mountains, Sophia stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the horizon brighten while cool morning air drifted through the forest. Everything felt different now. The same trees surrounded her. The same earth rested beneath her feet. Yet the uncertainty that had once followed her everywhere seemed to have been left behind with the darkness. Around her, the royal guards quietly prepared for the journey back to the capital. Their movements were respectful, and each greeting they offered Sophia carried genuine warmth. Hours earlier, most of them had never heard her name. Now they treated her as someone worthy of notice. Orion stood nearby, his smile returning more easily than before. The prince appeared lighter, as though the burdens of the previous night had finally lifted. He crouched beside a patch of wildflowers growing between the roots of an ancient oak and carefully picked a single silver blossom. Walking back towards Sophia, he offered it to her. "For the bravest person I met this year," he said. Sophia laughed softly, accepting the flower. "That sounds exaggerated." Orion grinned. "Not from where I am standing." The simple exchange filled the air with a sense of normalcy that Sophia appreciated. For the first time, she did not feel intimidated by royalty. They no longer seemed distant. They felt real. Nathaniel watched the interaction quietly, his expression thoughtful. When Sophia glanced toward him, she noticed something she had not seen before. The constant weight carried by a ruler seemed lighter in his eyes, almost hopeful. Queen Evelyn approached them both and rested her hands atop her walking cane. "Some nights change a life," she said gently. "Others change many lives at once." Sophia considered those words carefully. Looking around the clearing, she realized how true they were. The young Omega who had entered the forest alone no longer existed. She had discovered courage she never knew she possessed. She had found confidence where doubt once lived. Most importantly, she had learned that kindness was not weakness. It was strength, the strongest kind. Nathaniel stepped forward, and the morning sunlight caught the silver in his eyes. "The kingdom needs people who choose compassion when it would be easier to walk away," he said. "Never forget that." Sophia nodded slowly. She knew she would carry those words for the rest of her life. The first rays of sunlight spilled through the trees, painting the forest in gold. Birds began singing overhead. The world was waking. Orion extended his hand toward the path leading beyond the clearing. "Come visit the capital someday," he said. "You have friends there now." Sophia smiled. Friends. The word felt wonderful. As the royal party prepared to leave, she stood quietly and watched them begin their journey. Nathaniel paused before following the others. For a moment, he simply looked at her. There was gratitude in his gaze, respect, and a silent promise that neither of them needed to speak aloud. Then he inclined his head and turned toward the road. Sophia remained beneath the ancient trees long after they disappeared from sight. The silver flower rested gently in her hand. The forest was peaceful once more, but she no longer felt alone within it. Somewhere ahead waited new adventures, new friendships, and possibilities she could never have imagined before. As the morning sun rose higher above the horizon, Sophia lifted her face toward the light and smiled. Because sometimes destiny does not arrive with power or glory. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet choice to help someone in need. And sometimes, that single act of kindness is enough to change everything forever.